Welcome, friends and fellow outdoor enthusiasts, to another episode of the Run from the Norm podcast. This is the show where we celebrate unique individuals who turn the outdoors into their own personal playground, one run and one adventure at a time. I'm your host, Jake Reynolds. In this episode, I'm thrilled to be joined by my longtime friend and partner in countless wild adventures, all-around good dude, Ryan Anderson. If you haven't had the pleasure of hitting the trails with Ryan, let me tell you, no bushwhack is too thick and no idea is too far out there for him. There's a reason why people refer to it as Ryan Anderson Adventure Time. One of the most extreme cases of dehydration happened on an adventure with Ryan, and let's just say we were very fortunate to make it off the mountain that day. It was intense to say the least. Now, you'll notice that we mention the Hard Rock 100 throughout this conversation. We did record this just before the Hard Rock took place, and Ryan was very close on the wait list at 6 or 7, hoping to get in. I've known Ryan for many years, and in this episode we discuss not only his running journey, but also his incredible story of weight loss and the deeply personal and emotional journey his family faced during a medical emergency that nearly took the life of his daughter, Hannah. So let's get ready for another round of Ryan Anderson Adventure Time, and let's run from the norm. Mr. Ryan Anderson, thank you for taking some time to sit down and chat with me. We've known each other for, I don't know, I was thinking about this. How long have we known each other now? I think it was 2011, 2012.
I was thinking it was after Wilson Creek in 2012 was the first time we got together.
Because we'd done the Celebration Park run where there was just a ton of people out there. It seemed like everybody was training all at the same time, running around Celebration Park. And it was somewhere really close to my first ultra, which was the Silver City. What was that distance on that one? That was Emily's race.
That was 100K.
Oh, that was 100K. That was my first ultra.
Yeah, and we were doing Celebration because we were getting ready for Salt Flats, 100-miler.
Okay, because it was, I don't know, probably 20 people out there.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me backtrack real quick. What is it that got you into running in the first place? That's how we met, but what was your introduction to running, and what made you get out and want to engage in the first place?
I would say I was an accidental runner.
What do you mean by that?
In 2009, let's see, I guess I was 34, going on 35 years old, and Michelle, my wife, had some medical problems. She was not feeling well and was really sick, and she ended up having E. coli.
Oh my goodness, how'd she get that?
Who knows?
Oh.
It had to have been, I'm guessing, from something like fast food or something, because
Tainted burger?
I'm guessing, because she prepares the meals at her house and she's the only one that got it. If it was something prepared at home,
everybody would have got it.
Everybody would have got it. And she ended up in like a 45-day period. She ended up with E. coli, a kidney stone, and mono.
Oh my goodness.
And just back to back to back. And so her body was just absolutely hammered. And it was about all she could do to just kind of wake up and survive for the day. And during this time, she lost a fairly significant amount of weight.
Because she couldn't eat, or?
Yeah, she just had no gas and no go. And it's not the recommended method of weight loss, but like, hey.
I don't think anybody's saying mono is a great diet.
Yeah. Anyway, it's like, you know what? Maybe this is the wake-up call. We need to lose some weight, because at the time I was over 320.
And how tall are you?
I'm 5'9".
It's a pretty significant amount of weight.
Yeah, really, really overweight. So this all happened. I think all of her stuff kind of happened about on Valentine's Day-ish. So the 45-day period kind of went through about April 1st, and that's about when I started to exercise. And we have a homeowners association gym thing. That, you know, they have a few
different machines,
a couple of treadmills and ellipticals and recumbent bikes. And so I was doing that, and then we have a pool that opens up on Labor Day. So then I was doing that a little bit. And once Michelle got feeling better, she said, hey, maybe we could go for walks together at night. And I said, well, I'm kind of tired from doing my thing in the morning. Maybe you could just go for walks by yourself and I'll do my thing in the morning. And then I felt like kind of a turd for not joining her. So then I was doing my thing and joining her. And so my weight loss kind of really took off by doing a little bit of both.
And you weren't doing anything up to that point. Do you change your eating habits as you're starting to exercise?
Yeah, my food diet before all this was probably skip breakfast, have whatever I could find for lunch at work or go out to eat at lunch. And then Michelle always made great dinners at home, but then what would happen was I'd have mine plus seconds, and then I'd finish all the kids.
That's my problem.
Which is, a lot of people do that, and then you end up having four meals for dinner.
I feel guilty when I see food sitting there that could go to waste. I feel obligated to make it disappear.
Right. Yeah, that was my biggest problem. So, not having it for breakfast and then double, tripling whatever at night.
Right before you go to sleep.
Yeah.
So when you're exercising then, are you starting to pay attention to this?
When I started keeping track, I was 318. I think in 5 months, I lost 100 pounds.
Holy moly.
Somewhere along the way, I realized I had a hernia, and I was really kind of bummed out about it because I was worried that I wasn't going to be able to continue my exercise that I was really
starting to get into.
Yeah. Mostly just because I was in a habit of doing it. And I didn't want to get out of it because I had to take, 2 weeks off to recover or something. And the doctor told me, well, these are all external type stitches that are in your muscle. It's not like an internal thing that's going to pop and cause you problems. So if you feel comfortable doing it,
then do it.
Then go for it.
So when you started exercising, did you look up an exercise program, or did you just go in the gym and start throwing some weight?
I have no imagination when it comes to weights, so I've almost never done weights.
I know. I struggle with that too. Same thing.
I still don't, but I do, a little weights here and there, but it was usually like the elliptical or the treadmill, which I hated.
Yeah.
Which was kind of ironic.
But just something to move your body.
Yeah. And then the main thing, though, was when the pool opened, I would swim for an hour 5 days a week in the morning before work. And then on the weekend, we live out kind of South Boise, so I had this 20-mile bike ride loop that I would do. So my main stuff was swimming and biking.
This might be an ignorant question on my part. I've never lost that significant amount of weight. How does your body feel when you lose 100 pounds? Is it a mental boost? Where's your head at when you've seen such a drastic weight loss?
The physical difference, it seems fast, but it's relatively slow, so you're getting used to it slowly. The thing that doesn't happen as fast is the mental aspect. It was like one time Michelle came down to lunch, and we were just kind of observing somebody walking around downtown. And I was like, hey, look at that guy. He's really thin. And she says, hey, you look just like that guy. And I'm like, no, I don't. She's like, yes, you do.
You're not seeing that when you look in the mirror.
It takes a while for your brain to reprocess the fact that you look like a certain way for whatever, 10, 12, 15 years or longer, and now you don't. And in your head, you're this person for a long time. Psychologically and mentally, It takes a long time to change that internal talk.
That makes sense. Now, you said you were in the military. Before we started to record, we were sharing a story you were telling me about. There was a group of you, the boat you were on, you were taking turns on rowing machines, in essence, rowing from somewhere to Gibraltar Strait or something.
We were deployed to the Mediterranean, and on our way home from deployment, they wanted to raise money for it. In the Navy, it's called morale, welfare, and recreation. It's kind of like they do fun things for people.
Gotcha.
So if we could keep the rowing machine running for 12 straight days from the Straits of Gibraltar, which is the narrowest point of the Med between Morocco and Spain, it's like 4 miles wide. You can see Spain and Morocco, Europe and Africa at the same time. It's kind of cool. And from there into the Chesapeake Bay, they would donate like $2,000 to the MWR fund is what they called it.
And you signed up for it.
So I signed up every single day at 7 a.m., right there in the middle of when we were supposed to be meeting and having what they call quarters, where you talk about what
your team's going to be doing,
what your team's going to do for the day. And it just so happened that the rowing machine was right where our team had their meeting spot. And
you said that the person rowing gets to choose the music.
Yep. And so I chose Rage Against the Machine every single day at 7:00, right during the meeting. And they would always tell me to turn it off.
Pissed off a few people.
and I would say, hey, you want to choose the music? You need to sign up.
Did any of them sign up?
I don't know, but I never turned the music off.
That's funny. So you're on the boat, you're doing things like the rowing activities. Anyway, in the military, I assume you have to stay consistent with your PT. When you do get out of the military, what shifts to where you had this period where you increased the weight to where that became your normal before we'll get into the next step of that story?
Well, first of all, I came home and I was married at the time and I had one child.
Okay.
Michelle worked and I was going to college. Then we got pregnant with our second child. So Michelle worked as long as she could. She worked almost right up to when our daughter Hannah was born. And then when she couldn't work anymore, I started working full time. So I'm working full time, going to school full time. And
it's just all you can do to get through a day.
Trying to be a husband full time and a dad full time. I mean,
you blink and time has gone by.
Yeah, this story is not unique. I mean, there's a lot of parents out there that are everything to everybody. But, for me personally, that's kind of what slipped because there's only so many hours in the day. And for me, it was about all I could do to get school and work and family obligations done. And everything else just kind of
falls to the wayside.
Yeah.
So how do you go from there to running 100 miles? How do you put those two? How do you put those two together?
The catalyst was having a hernia surgery. So 1st of August, I'm doing really good. I'd probably lost 85, 90 pounds. I don't know. And the doctor says, you can do whatever you want to do. You just can't go swimming anymore. With the incision, it needs time to heal. Because I was exercising before work and I didn't want to go riding my bike at 5 a.m. In the dark on the roads because I hadn't really been out to the trails and didn't have trail lights and all that stuff yet. But anyway, so I was like, what am I going to do? He's like, you could try running. I'm like, oh, that sounds horrible. Why do I want to do that? And he's like, well, it's not forever. Let's just till it heals. It might only be a little bit. So I had the surgery. I think the day I had surgery, I got up and I walked. It hurt and it took forever, but we walked from our house to the end of Maple Grove. It was like, I don't know, half a mile or something. And the next day we were going to McCall. We get up to McCall and I took my mountain bike because that was about the only thing I could do. And the next day I rode my mountain bike around the lake, Bayette Lake, the day after surgery. And everybody was really worried about me because I was gone forever. Cell phone coverage is
on that backside.
Sketchy at best. And I come rolling in and everyone's like, oh my gosh, you're okay. I'm like, why wouldn't I be okay? I'm like, you've been gone forever. I'm like, I'm just slow.
You're enjoying it.
And everything hurts. And I'm like, yeah, but you just had surgery, dude, yesterday. We were worried about you. I'm like, I don't know. Sorry.
What is it about dudes being stubborn? When I had my innards fixed after I was done with kids, the next day I was out splitting wood and delivering firewood for a tree company that I worked for back in the day.
Yeah, so I had this surgery and I rode the bike. Then what happened was they had these internal stitches and these internal stitches are permanent, but so they're kind of like this monofilament and it's like like fishing line or something. And the way that they tie them, they kind of tie them like, I don't know, like a French braid or something so that they're supposed to kind of lay down and then just lay down flat. Well, they didn't lay down flat. They kind of kept poking up and they kept poking through the incision.
Oh.
So it kept weeping and weeping and weeping. And I went back and I tried to fix it. And so then I start running like the 1st of September and it keeps weeping. And then I set an appointment for the 15th of September and it keeps weeping and I keep going back and I keep going back for months.
It just won't heal.
And in the meantime, I start running and I start to enjoy it miraculously.
Starts to shift for you.
And my sister, Rochelle, she lived in California at the time, and her husband, when he was in college, had run the St. George Marathon, and she wanted to do the marathon, but not that year. She said, let's get in shape, marathon shape, and then we'll put our names in and do it next year because it was a lottery. And I said, okay, I don't know anything about running. So she was following a plan. And I said, email me whatever you're doing this week and I'll do what you're doing and we'll
follow that.
So she had some like 18-week plan. So, and she was doing a walking plan. Like a walk to marathon. And I was like, yeah, okay, fine, I'll do that. So I'm doing her walking plan and I'm like, gosh, I got stuff to do. So after a while I started running it so that I could just get done. And then I'm like, oh, this isn't so bad. And, eventually I got through it. And, so I started running on September 1st. And both of us were going to just run let's see if we can do it marathon at the end of this training plan. And then because of conflicts and whatever, her plan 18 weeks turned into, I think, 12 weeks or something. So I ran my first marathon on December 6th on the Greenbelt, just me and Michelle. I didn't have like a running watch or anything. And for anybody who doesn't know, there's 10th mile markers everywhere on the Greenbelt. You've probably seen them. But if you didn't have a watch and you wanted to know markers and you wanted to know how far you've gone, it's easy to start at the 0 marker, which if you don't know is the Anne Frank Memorial.
Okay.
We started there and Michelle was on her bike and she just carried a backpack with water. And I did 5 out and back towards Glenwood, came back to the car. We did 5 out and back to basically Barber Dam, came back to the car, and then did 5 out and back to the golf course.
Warm Springs Golf Course.
Yeah, Warm Springs. And so what she would do is she wouldn't quite go to the out and back. She would stop a little bit short, grab the water out of the backpack, and then hand it to me. So I never stopped the whole time. You
just kept going.
I was moving and the watch was moving the whole time.
And you did this for a marathon distance?
Yeah.
And that was your first, I'm saying this in quotes, but that was your first race.
Yeah. And I think it took me, I don't know, like 4.5 hours. And this was before I knew anything about, preparing for a run. And of course it was December 6th. So it was like 20 degrees and I'm wearing just sweats, like regular guy sweats.
Got your Rocky outfit on.
Yeah. And for those who don't know me, I sweat like a beast. So my sweats weighed like 28 pounds. And then I had
it was 20 degrees out.
I had a long sleeve cotton t-shirt that weighed 9 pounds. And then I had a long sleeve sweatshirt that again weighed probably as much as the pants.
Oh my gosh. You're just decked out in cotton.
Oh yeah. It was insane. And thankfully there was no snow on the ground. But anyway, so we finished and, it was kind of,
Did the light go off at that point after you finished it and suddenly you want to sign up for another race? Or at what point did you shift from, I've done this marathon and get introduced to this crazy world of ultra marathon running?
Well, in the beginning, it was kind of uneventful. You finish and you're like, oh, that was interesting. Now what? What do I do next? And
I've got this fitness. What am I going to do with it?
Yeah. So I mentioned to people that I ran a marathon and people would say, oh yeah, which one? That sounds cool. And I said, well, it wasn't a real marathon. It was me on the Greenbelt. My wife was riding the bike. And then people go, oh.
They're deflated because they didn't, they want to recognize the run that you did.
Right. And then I kind of thought to myself, I'm like, 26.2 miles is still the same distance, whether you paid $200 and got a crappy t-shirt.
Right.
Or not.
Or you just went out and did the adventure.
Yeah. So after that, I started calling it the Ryan Anderson Invitational Marathon. And there was one invitation. And then,
Is that the one that you still do?
And I still do it.
Okay. Cause you did it this year, correct?
Yeah. And then there was a few years that I didn't do it. So now I call it the Ryan Anderson sort of annual invitational marathon.
But you're back on track, and we'll get to what I'm thinking with the break there.
Yeah. So the second year I ran with Andrea Simonson for her first marathon in the Greenbelt.
Oh, okay.
She did something similar.
Okay.
And then the next year I ran with Marcy Gabbert for her first marathon on the Greenbelt. And then after that, it was just me and one or two other people. Derek Calls ran with me, and Christy Mechanic ran with me, and Drew Adams has run with me.
Oh, okay.
And this year, David Emerson from Twin Falls joined me. So maybe I should invite some people to the invitational. Maybe they'd come with me.
Send out a few more than one invitation.
I always think, who's going to want to run Greenbelt in December? But
you never know who's up for that adventure.
We always have fun one way or another. I mean, we've done it when there's been 4 inches of powder on the Greenbelt. We've done it when it's been 45 degrees. We've done it when it's 10 degrees.
Whatever it happens to be.
And when we've started it, it's finished no matter what. In fact, this year, I was feeling so bad that I told him I was going to call it at halfway. So we stopped at halfway, and I said, I appreciate you guys coming. I'll buy you lunch. So we went to somewhere and I bought them lunch. They left, and I went right back to the Greenbelt, and they finished.
Did you really?
Because I didn't want them to have to get on the struggle bus with me for another, I don't know how many hours it took me, but I was like, I'm going to finish, but I don't want to occupy somebody's entire day. So I went back out and I walked every step of the last, I don't know how long it was, 14 more miles or 13 miles or whatever. But
you were committed that you had to get out there and finish it.
Yeah, it was nice to finish, but I've had some good days out there. Derek and I one time ran a 320. Just on a whim.
Just out doing it.
It was one of those days where if you let your negativity bubble up, we would have quit. We would have been eaten. We kind of joked that, we've run a lot together, and, there's been a lot of days where when the weather's crappy, we end up at Merritt's on State Street or IHOP. Yeah. Like, this looks like an IHOP day, and we just skip running and go have breakfast somewhere. And on our out and back down to Glenwood, I just wasn't feeling it, and he wasn't feeling it. And I was like, man, this sucks. I just want to quit. And I was like, yeah, but we're here. Might as well just keep going. And then things kind of turned around, and we ended up running like someone's dream day, 320. That's
moving right along.
That's what I ran at the Boston Marathon.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And I told him this when we finished. He's like, oh my gosh, if you would have told me, we would have been eating waffles like 10 minutes later, because I was thinking the exact same thing. And we were right down there by Merritt's.
Ready to go in.
Down to the bike Glenwood. But, it was a good lesson, because when you're out running, if you ever let negativity like bubble up to the surface, it'll eat you. It'll eat you alive.
Especially when you get into the ultra world.
Yeah.
Which I'd like to segue, because if you go through your ultra sign up, you ran since, 2010, 2011. You ran so many races every year. It seemed like you ran just about everything that you could get to. And a lot of races you've ran consistently year after year after year. What introduced you to the ultra world, and what made you want to get into it?
Once I ran my marathon, and the next year I did get into St. George and trained, and over the winter I ran the Leon's Fat Ass 50K on January 1st,
And that's out here.
I've wanted to resurrect. Yeah, I've wanted to resurrect that because that was fun, and Emily used to do that for a while, and that was the first ultra anything I did.
Oh, really?
It was my first DNF too. I DNF'd at mile 21, which was kind of funny, but I just wasn't ready because I'd been training for a marathon, and all the unevenness of the trail just destroyed me.
Hate you.
But I got to know people. I mean, that was the first day I met Dennis, and I met John Kinzer, and I met Ben, and I met Lynette and Donna Breswell. I met
the OG crew back in that day.
Yeah, I met like 20 people. Well, I'm preparing for Boston because I had qualified at St. George. So I know all these trail runners, and they're doing all these fun things in the foothills. Mm-hmm. And I'm out going, well, I don't want to run in the foothills because I might hurt myself and twist an ankle and ruin my shot at Boston, and which is kind of ironic. I always think about that because when you do an ultra, the way you prep for an ultra is you go find the gnarliest thing and try and pound your body into the ground.
Right.
And when you're running a road marathon, you try and stay away from anything that might possibly hurt you.
So you go from the fat ass run, and then what changes into where suddenly you're signing up for pretty much, run after run, month after month. And you've ran some big races too. I mean, you've ran Western States, you ran Wasatch, you ran the Bear multiple times.
Well, I think what initially got me into it was I'm watching these guys, they're just out having fun. And I'm out running pace.
Yeah.
And running distance and, really focusing on all the
details.
The details.
Do you track all your mileage and your stats and all that?
I did more when I was road running. Now it's just like I have all the detail, but I don't look at it.
Gotcha.
Like,
okay.
That's interesting. Whatever. Yeah. Versus when I was road running, it was
dissect every little thing.
Yeah. So I, get better at it. But anyway, so when I was doing Boston, everyone's like, aren't you excited? And I'm like, yeah, I'm excited for it to be over so I can go run the Pocatello 50. I can't wait to get out on the trails and go have fun in the mountains. Honestly, that was what I was looking forward to that whole spring was Boston to be over. So I could get out and play in the hills. So I could go run the Pocatello 50.
Interesting.
And then I got my butt handed to me and I was like third from last or something. Just the mountains and the elevation and the altitude, I didn't respect it. And
it got you.
So I came, after that, I really buckled down on trying to be prepared for the distance and the game altitude and all of that. So
I always think when I think of first getting my ass handed to me, it's Speed Goat, which you've actually done Speed Goat multiple times too. That is an absolutely brutal course. And I probably should have given it more respect than I did going, when it first started and you take off. That run absolutely whooped my ass. And that was a huge learning experience, which actually will lead to a question. Out of all the races that you've done, the highs and the lows and everything that you've experienced, what would you say is the most important lesson that you've learned out of all of the experiences that you've had with these races?
I was at Pocatello this year. Last couple of years, I volunteered at mile 86 of the 100-miler at South Scout. And it's fun to see what people look like at the end. I've run plenty of races and I know what people look like at the end because I've been there and done that. But I was there and I jumped in with a guy and he was struggling and he's like, well, I'm going to be slow. And I said, oh, I don't care. I'm just here for a good time and I'm preparing for a race and I just need time in my feet and we'll just hang out and we'll have a good time. Right. So we're taking off and I start telling him about my experiences at Pocatello and I have two of them. My first one was my very first ultra and I got my butt handed to me and I was second or third from last or whatever it was.
It's a tough course.
And the second time I ran the 100K and I was dead last. So that day, I think it was 2013 or something, I was running into City Creek and there was like a sagebrush that had gotten kind of bent over and I kicked the bent over base of the sagebrush. And when I did, I really yanked my hip flexor and I couldn't run downhill. And when you're at Pocatello and you cannot run downhill, you are royally screwed.
Yeah, you're in trouble.
You can't just run all the uphills and walk all the downhills there. And so I was just deflated. And that's early in the race. It's like mile, 16. I was before 20. I just kind of came in and I was kind of deflated. I'm like, well, I'm just going to do what I can and maybe I'll get cut and maybe not.
Just keep on moving.
So I just kept moving and tried my best. And I realized I was way at the back and I'm looking at my watch and I'm thinking I'm going to get cut at, oh gosh, I can't remember what the name of the aid station. It's the one that crosses the highway. So I kept laying down on the trail trying to relax my hip flexor. And so everyone who passed me kept telling the aid station, there's a guy laying down.
He's dying.
Yeah. There's this dude and he's hurt. And so when I got in there, hey, did you see the guy on the trail? Is he okay? And I'm like, that was me. And they're like, oh, awesome. You just made the cutoff. And I was super bummed. I just wanted to be cut so my day could be over. So then I had this moment where I was like, do I just want to quit? I'm like, I'm not going to quit. I don't want to be a quitter. And they had a rule there that you couldn't leave that aid station without a headlamp. And my headlamp was at Big Fir, that's the aid station after. And I wasn't probably going to make it there. Plus, it's all uphill. You got to go over Scout Mountain.
You got some hours in the mountains without a headlamp.
Yeah. So I was like, does anybody have one I could borrow? And it was just total crickets. And I was like, well, I'm not quitting and I don't have a headlamp and I'm leaving. So I left. I just walked out. And the race director, Luke Nelson, comes up on a beach cruiser in flip-flops. And he goes, "Are you the guy that was laying down on the trail?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "What are you doing? Do you have a headlamp?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it's in my bag at Big Fur. I'm just going to run.
Going to get it.
I'm just going to go as hard as I can, see if I can get it." He goes into the aid station and he goes, "Hey, has anybody got a headlamp this dude can borrow?" Someone hands one to him, just like 2 seconds. I'm like, "I get it. You know him.
Right.
He's good for it. You don't know me from Adam, whatever." Someone gives me a headlamp. So I take off and I just made the cutoff like within minutes at Scout.
So you're bummed out again. Oh, dang it.
I just made the cut Big Fur. And back then, Carl Meltzer was the aid station captain at Big Fur.
Oh, wow.
He always was. And then there was another guy there named Rock Horton,
he's a legend too.
An OG legend too. And I said, "Am I in last place?" And he's like, "Yeah, you're the last guy." And he's like, "What's going on? Are you hurt? Or are you just having a bad day?" And I was like, "Well, for perspective, Carl, I finished Speed Goat in 7 hours and 30 minutes last year." And he's like, "Holy beep, you are having a bad day." Because that's a really good time at Speed Goat.
Yeah, that's a good run.
And he knew it. So then when I left out of there,
he knows you're capable of it.
He actually walked up the hill. And for those who don't know, the hill out of that last aid station is a punch in the face. It's just straight up for, I don't know, half a mile or something. He walked that whole uphill with me and we just chit-chatted.
That's cool.
I made it in. And of all the races that I've done, honestly, that's the one I'm the most proud of.
Why is that?
I think it's just because I was so close to not making the cut when I could have just quit. And I just kept giving it everything I had.
What was it that kept you going?
I don't know.
It's easy to quit.
Stubbornness, I think.
Yeah.
You know, I've had other races where I've quit since then, but usually it's, you know, some sort of painful thing or like you can see on the clock that it's just not going to happen. And, you know, there's times when if you have time, why not just keep going? But that's the one thing that I always think about.
Is that race in that moment?
As a positive thing. Another thing I always think about is people will ask me if my kids run, and I always tell them, no, they don't really. My son has done a race here and there. He did the McCall Classic, the Bear Pete one with me last year. And I tell people, you know, honestly, I don't care if my kids ever run a step in their life, but what I hope they gain from observing me is that you can do hard things. You can set crazy goals and you can achieve crazy goals and do difficult things, whether that's running or school or relationships or whatever that may be. Nothing is impossible if you know,
put in the work.
Yeah. Whatever it is in your life.
I think of Tracy Harris after a discussion I had with him, and he kept repeating, work works.
Yep.
Yeah. It absolutely does, because I don't push it either. But what I do encourage is, again, what you're saying, doing hard things and spending time outside, because there's just something magical for me that puts me in a better mental headspace when I'm spending time outside or I'm out sweating and whatever that might be. And I want the kids to see a positive role model in what you're doing.
Right.
So I'm going to shift gears a little bit, you know, as we're talking about kids, and you're deep into racing. You've been doing it for a long time. You've had all these experiences with all these different efforts, whether it's, again, I mentioned Western States, Speed Goat, Scout. Your ultra sign-up is lengthy. And then everything changes because, again, going back to family, suddenly you had an issue where you really had to kind of circle the wagons around something happening with one of your children. Do you want to speak about that?
Sure. In 2016, my daughter, Hannah, she went to a friend's house for a birthday party, and kind of uneventful, normal teenage thing. She was 16 years old and was at this party, and Michelle and I are home watching a Netflix movie, and we asked our older daughter to take her, I think. Then at some point she calls and says, "Hey, I'm not feeling good. Can you come get me?" And we're like, "Oh man, really? We're in the middle of a movie. Can you seriously?"
Plot's getting good.
And she's like, "Yeah, I don't feel good." So then we asked our older daughter, "Hey, can you go get her?"
Just she's feeling sick,
yeah, and
feeling good.
It's just right around the corner. It's like a half a mile away. So
there's nothing leading up to it. She was good health, feeling fine.
Yeah, so Cammie goes over there to get her, and then Cammie calls us and she says, "Dude, this isn't right. You guys need to come and get her." I'm like, "Just bring her home. It's like a half a mile away. Like what possibly could be wrong?" And she's like, "You gotta get her over here right now." We're like, "Fine," we're thinking it's just like no big deal. And we go over there and she's just kind of incoherent and she's been throwing up, and they had given her some Advil or Tylenol, I don't remember which in retrospect is the absolute worst thing they could have done for her. But thankfully she was throwing up, so it didn't matter. But anyway, we ended up taking her to the hospital, and unfortunately, we took her to St. Luke's in Meridian as opposed to St. Luke's downtown, because from where we live, it's kind of a toss-up. Mm-hmm. And so we went to the Meridian one, but we go in there and they said, "Well, is there anything going on?" And we're like, "Well, she was feeling pretty good earlier, and then now all of a sudden she has this crazy, crazy headache and she's throwing up." And they're like, "Have you noticed anything different about her lately?" And like, "I don't know. She's got these red spots all over her arm and all over her back." And you could just see the nurse, like her whole demeanor, her whole face just completely changed. And I knew in that moment that she knew exactly what it was, but she didn't say anything. And she's like, "Well, we're going to have to run some tests." What it turned out to be was a condition called ITP, which is short for idiothrombocytopenia, which is big fancy medical terminology for your body's killing its own platelets. So when your platelet count drops below a certain point, your platelets keep the clotting factor in your blood. And once there's no platelets in there, it kind of reaches the same consistency as water, essentially. Mm-hmm. And so once it reaches that level, the blood no longer wants to stay within your vessels, and it falls out of your vessels. And the red spots are petechial hemorrhaging. And that's what you can see visually on the skin, but that's also happening everywhere else in your body. So it's happening in your brain. And she had, essentially a brain hemorrhage, and that turned into a stroke. And
it's 16 years old.
Yeah. And so that's what her headache was a brain bleed. So they rushed her downtown for emergency brain surgery. And initially we thought she had, like a bad migraine. They'd, do some tests, give her some fluid IVs and some medication, and we'd be on our way and
get back to your Netflix.
Yeah. In fact, that morning I had woke up at like 4 a.m. and run 20 something miles up in Glens Ferry, and I was dead tired already. And so Michelle had told me to go home and she would let me know, and she called me and I was just completely brain dead, and I answered the phone and she said, "Meet me downtown." And I was like, "Yeah, okay, cool." And then I hung up the phone and went back to sleep.
Oh no.
And so they transferred Hannah in an ambulance, and Michelle went downtown while they're doing surgery. Michelle's waiting for me to show up, and I'm asleep.
You're just out
because I'm
exhausted.
And she called my daughter, Cammie, and woke me up. Anyway, I got down there like crazy late, and Michelle had to deal with this all alone, which was terrible. But
suddenly your life is completely upended.
Yeah. And this was July 30th of 2016. And
how do you cope with that? I mean, obviously I was around at this time too, and I remember how difficult this was. I mean, it was scary times of whether she was going to make it or not. And I can't imagine what you're going through as a parent, having to watch your child go through this. How do you deal with that?
Honestly, we didn't know. I think mentally as a parent, I couldn't let myself get there because I didn't want to be negative, kind of like we were talking about, like the ultra running stuff. You let the negativity or the second guessing bubble up to the surface.
It's going to eat you alive.
And it'll eat you up. if you let the thought come up that, my child could possibly die from this, you can't function. You have to put all of that completely out of your mind and just focus on what can I do to improve this situation right here, right now, and just ignore everything else, which was really hard because, we have 4 kids. So, at the time, our oldest was working and had a vehicle, so she could get, around and to the hospital and do the things that she needed to do. And our 2 younger kids were 12, 11. So, we were at the hospital or at work. I still had to work because I got to pay bills and have insurance and all this stuff. And, I got FMLA, which is wonderful, but that just gives you time off. It doesn't pay your bills.
Yeah.
And so
you still have to take care of the responsibilities.
I still had to go to work, which was horrific to have to sit there at work and wonder what's happening at the hospital all day and then
try to get your brain around the work that you're trying to get accomplished.
Yeah, and balance all of the things that I deal with, Hannah's situation, and got other children that they kind of lost their mom, dad, and both their sisters on the same day, which was terrible and
tragic for them too.
And it's summer vacation, so they don't really have a support network, which was crazy.
And at that age, it's tough because they don't really fully understand the scope of what's going on like you would as an adult, I guess.
Yeah, that could be good or bad.
I know. So what role did running play in dealing with that? Because I know there was one morning out running the foothills, and I think I came across somebody in the dark and happened to hear, it's Ryan Anderson. I don't know if you remember that or not. I can only imagine things were just a blur, but what role did running play in getting you through managing all of this? Or does it just not become important anymore to where everything kind of falls to the wayside and it's, again, circle the wagons, focus on family and buckle down?
Well, in that first month, I still got out most days because that was the thing that I used for my stress reliever on a normal day. And that's what I for sure used it for during this time frame. I remember one time you and John Kinzer came down and we went and ran up across Fat Tire at 11 o'clock at night.
Yep.
I think about that a lot of times when I cross Fat Tire because I had such a crazy schedule that, I would call people and say, hey, I got time. Do you have time? Like one time I did a run up at Bogus from like 11 to 1:30 in the morning. I wanted to keep some sort of sense of normal that year. I ran the Bogus 60K, but I ran it when I had time, which started at 10 p.m. And I finished right as they were starting the regular 60K. And it was funny because I think Holly was doing the start line, like, okay, the flags are pink and, here's the aid stations and, we're about ready to start. And, oh, here's our first finisher. Ryan's coming down whatever the trail is. And I got kind of cheered in at, 5:57 in the morning or whatever time it was. And we'd been out all night long and she let me run it on my schedule because
take an official time.
And as soon as I finished, I got in the car and went straight to the hospital.
So as you're going through all this and trying to maintain this balance and processing, I can only imagine that things get pretty dark. Did you find yourself slipping into depression? And if so, how do you find your way out of that?
I don't think it happened in the beginning because we were just so focused on
so much going on.
Yeah, everything that was going on. There's something day to day, like you're always having to focus on, there's always decisions to be made. The one thing that I do remember that was very difficult was kind of being stuck in this no man's land of you could never be too happy with good news because bad news is right around the corner. And you could never be too low because you had to be present and available to make life-altering decisions right now at a moment's notice. And so, when there was a good day, it was hard to be excited because things would always change at a moment's notice. Like the hardest day was she was in a coma for like 5 weeks, and it was kind of a chemical induced coma because they wanted her body to heal and for her platelets to recover, and they weren't recovering, and they couldn't do surgery because typically doing a splenectomy, removing your spleen, can stop the progression of the platelet destruction, but they can't do surgery with your platelet count. So
because you just keep bleeding.
Yeah, you'd bleed to death. And so they're like, we have to wait until she's recovered to a point where we have a backup. You know, we can't do it when she's 0. She'll bleed to death. We need it when she's at a decent number. So one day she's up to like 80 or something. Normal platelet range is like 150 to like 400 is the number. With infusions, was it like 70 or something? So we're excited, you know, I'm like, hey, she's having a good day. I'm down in the lobby. I'm buying coffee for all the nurses. You know, my family's going to come up. I think it was a Sunday. And somebody that I know from my neighborhood was going to buy our family, like, order in Olive Garden. It was just like everything was kind of going really great. And then the doctors pulled Michelle and I away from family and said, we need to talk. Okay, well, she's having a good day. She's at a point where we have some leeway. I think today's the day we need to do surgery. Like,
oh my gosh, just like that?
Just right now. And it's Sunday, so it's not crazy in here. We can get into the surgery like right now. And they're like, we've already called all the support people that we need, and they can be here in 20 minutes or whatever. You know, Michelle's asking questions. She's like, well, what's this mean? What are the chances that this works when you do a splenectomy? And they said, well, 75% of the time, a splenectomy just completely stops the platelet destruction. And we both kind of look at each other. And then I said, well, what about the other 25% of the time? And they didn't say anything. They just looked at us with kind of a, you know.
Yeah, what do you say? But it's implied.
Yeah.
How the hell do you make that decision?
Yeah.
Knowing that there's such a big risk for your child?
I've always told people, hey, I'm a betting man. I'll take 3-to-1 odds every day of the week. But when the other end of the odds are life and death, that's not great.
Changes the game.
And honestly, that was probably one of the hardest days of my life. Mostly, I think the hardest part is when you're in that situation. You know, before surgery, they always make you sign a piece of paper that says you're not going to sue us. And, you know, if things go bad, we've discussed the things that can go wrong and that you're aware of all of these things. And
they have to cover their bases.
They have to cover their butts. Mm-hmm. And I probably had to sign 20 of those sheets of paper. And after a while, it just got to be so calm, and I didn't even ask any questions. It's not even an option at some point. Because like this one, I can't say no, because the other option is you don't do anything, and then, you know.
The potential is a lot worse.
Yeah. So anyway, it was like, well, we got to do something.
Trust the medical professionals.
Yeah, so thankfully, things worked out.
And Hannah is doing well now. She did come through this.
She had the splenectomy, the platelets recovered eventually, but once she woke up, she had lost all of her muscle mass. She'd been incapacitated for so long,
had to relearn everything.
She had to learn everything. She couldn't walk, talk, sit up, feed herself. You know, with the stroke, she had no cognitive function. She had a condition called aphasia, where it's like your neurofunctions are clicking and your muscular functions are clicking, but they're not talking to each other. Mm-hmm. So like you could look at her and she could look at you and you'd say blink once for yes, and she'd just stare at you. But inside her head, she knows what you said to her, but she couldn't put the neuro function and actual muscular do this function together at the same time. So she had to go to rehab to learn all that. And once we got down there, the way they kind of described it to us was It's like her brain was a big library that just had a 9.6 earthquake.
Oh.
And all of everything she's ever known.
It's in there, but it just scattered on the floor.
Yeah, it's sitting on the floor in a big pile. And our job is to do enough therapy that we can pick these things up off the floor and put them back on the shelf.
In the right spot.
In a place that she can access them. So,
crazy.
So we start, she started with colors. She's now 17. She had her birthday while she was in St. Luke's. Started with her colors and her numbers, that she learned when she was
you have to start it all over again.
Yeah. And
how is she today?
So she's doing good. She graduated high school and she's taken 2 years worth of college at CWI, and she drives her own car. She does have to have a special driving apparatus because of the weakness on her right side. So she drives with a left-sided gas pedal and one of those like steering knobs, but
that's just the way she makes sure nobody borrows her car.
Yeah. Well, it can come out, so I can borrow her car. In fact, I used to borrow her car all the time when she wasn't able to drive, and it was kind of irritating for her because it was this constant reminder that she wasn't able to drive. And so I went out and just bought a car exactly like hers for myself. The only difference is mine's gray and hers is red.
Oh, that's funny.
It's an '08 Scion. It's the same car.
Oh, that's too funny.
But anyway, so yeah, she's doing a lot better. She works at Amazon. She's
awesome.
She kind of jokes. When she was in the hospital, they did a brain scan on her, and the doctors had told us, when there's a situation like this, there's kind of an array of survivability that can range from 0 to 100, completely non-responsive to everything's cool. And he's like, with the brain scan that we've done on her, she's like 96%.
Crazy.
She just had a little bit of, from the stroke there, you can see there's a little bit of brain damage in there.
But she was pretty damn lucky.
Yeah, Hannah jokes that she needs a hoodie that says 96% on it. That way she can tell people why she's a little goofy.
Oh, that's too funny. Well, at least she's got a sense of humor.
She does. Through the whole thing, she always had a great attitude. I mean, there's people that get bent out of shape when their coffee isn't made right or someone cuts them off, and
that puts everything in perspective.
In traffic. And when she woke up, I asked her, what did you think when you were aware and realized that you couldn't talk and you couldn't eat and you couldn't do anything? You were like a complete almost invalid in your bed. And she goes, well, I knew that I was in the hospital, so it must be bad. I knew that everyone who came to see me was crying. So something terrible must have happened. But I'm alive, so can't all be bad.
Perspective.
And,
the resilience.
Yeah, and she just had a great attitude about it. And I'm like, man, if I was in your position, I'd probably just sit there and cry all day long about how terrible my life was. And they did tell us at the hospital, older people, they just struggle because younger people just have this positive outlook like, that's cool. We'll fix this.
Got to bounce back from it.
When you're 50 or 60 or 70, you're like, my life's over.
It seems like in the world. I was telling you, I hurt my back. I've been dealing with sciatica. It's like, oh my God, my life is over. I'm never going to be able to move like I did. So she has made this amazing recovery. That's awesome to hear. When was the recovery, would you say, I don't know if it's ever complete, but at what point was she kind of getting back to a normal routine to where you started seeing some normalcy in your life and your family's life?
Well, when she came back, we were in St. Luke's till, I don't know, mid-October that year. So,
and what year is this?
This is 16. So August, September, October. And then we were down in Salt Lake for 2 months. And then when we came home mid-December, she says, Dad, I want to go back to school in the spring semester. And I said, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but I don't even care if you ever go to school again.
Mm.
Your main job is to go to therapy, regain everything you lost, just get better. And she said, what I need to get better is to stop being a hospital charity case and be with my friends and do the normal things that normal people my age do, like go to school and, just get back to normal.
Sure.
And so after all of this of, whatever, 5.5 months, she came home December 16th. She started right back at Mountain View on like January 20th, which baffled me. She's in a wheelchair, got a zipper head, no hair.
And she just wants to go.
Yeah. And I'm like, aren't you worried about what people are going to think or say or whatever? And she's like, I don't care what anybody has to say about me. That's their problem, not mine.
Yep, absolutely.
She's had a great attitude about it. And she goes, plus I got a wheelchair, so I get to get out early. So I'll get in the passing period early and I don't have to deal with all these idiots.
That's awesome. She maintains a bright spot to everything through the whole thing. That's crazy.
Yeah. So Michelle had to go to like 1 million therapy appointments with her for a long time, but it was probably, I don't know, a year and a half before it was kind of like back to normal.
Well, it's amazing that after going through all this, she made such really a miraculous recovery and was so ready to find her sense of normal again.
Yeah.
So now I'm going to kind of steer left a little bit here. So as I'm going through and I'm looking at your ultra sign up, every year there's a race pretty much every month, every 2 months. And then there was a gap, 2019 to 2022. There's a 2 or 3 year gap where I don't see anything.
It was really like 2016. The only thing that happened between there was the frenzy. I was the only person that did the frenzy every year.
Yeah, I did see that.
And finished it, but I wasn't in shape to do the frenzy in 17, 18, or 19, or whatever it was.
So after having such a commitment to your life is really, it's running, you're getting out and you're doing these things and you're getting in shape to run these efforts. What was the final straw where you just put it all to the side? And then what was the catalyst that made you decide to get back into it again?
Well, I think what happened was when we were going through all of this with Hannah, we were so focused on making sure that we were taking care of her and getting all of
her needs
met that we neglected our own. Plus, we were on the road constantly. Like, I lived at the hospital because I had to work, like I said. So, and Michelle, we kind of took shifts, right? So she was there during the day and I was there at night, just in case something crazy happened or they needed somebody to give permission to do something. So I worked during the day, and after work, I would go to the hospital. And then in the morning, Michelle would come to the hospital and I would go back to work.
Just take a bird bath with a washcloth and...
Well, we had locker rooms at work, and then we also had access to a shower at St. Luke's. But, sometimes people would ask me, is there anything I can do for you at home? And I'm like, I don't know. I haven't been home in 2 weeks. Anyway, so then when we went to Salt Lake, one of us would stay for a week. And then on Friday, the other one would come back and Michelle would stay for a week. So we took turns. Thankfully, I was able to use my FMLA and
make it work.
I got to the point where I'm like, I don't even care if they're paying me. I need to be here with my family more than I need to get paid. So if I have to, I'm just going to take my savings and,
do what you have to
do what I got to do for money, but I need to be here. So as that all happens and, Hannah gets better and now we don't have a crisis to manage. And there's this big kind of letdown from all of the
riding that adrenaline craziness.
Then it's like, I think I realized that I just lost my passion for running. It probably was as much, it just took such an emotional toll on me that I needed to take a break from everything.
Yeah.
And so
less to think about.
Yeah. Then when I took a break from everything, you get out of shape. And then when you try and
do what you used to do.
Yeah, then it's not as much fun because it hurts.
Yeah.
You can't go as far. You can't do a loop because you're too damn slow.
You remember all the things that you could do and the shape that you were in, and it's a huge blow to your ego that you can't go out and, like you say, run those same loops and maintain a pace. Or
Yeah, so then when I would go, I would come back feeling worse than when I went.
I understand.
And it was such a negative feeling that I just stopped altogether. And that's kind of when I started doing like the woodworking thing. I picked up woodworking because I was like, I need a hobby that's not running, because this is so negative in my head that I need something else that I can do.
Yeah.
So
are you still doing woodwork?
occasionally I made something for the CFO at Idaho Power the other day that he thought was pretty cool.
What'd you make?
Oh, we were sitting in a meeting one time and he was talking about how he was going to adjust something. And I said, whoa, that sounds like you're trying to like set earnings. And he goes, Ryan, that's strong language. That's against the rules. What I call it is preserving optionality. What we do in our job is we reserve future options. So, because we're financial forecasters, that's what I do at Idaho Power. And I was like, oh, that's really nice. I'm going to write that down. So I got this piece of curly maple, and then I got this finish that people put on gun stocks. And he's a hunter. So I put this gun stock finish on it. And then you apply it with a heat gun, and it makes the curly maple just really pop like a violin look.
Oh, wow.
Or something.
A mile deep. And
yeah. And anyway, I gave it to him. He thought it was pretty funny.
Oh, that's cool. So how has your running changed now? I'm not sure if you're training like you used to. What's your relationship with running now, and what's it look like for you?
Well, back in 2021, Michelle could see how negative this whole thing was for me, and that I'd gained a bunch of weight, and that both of us needed to do something a little more positive with our lives and our time. And so we decided we were going to try and get back in shape again. And so the two of us started on a weight loss plan again. And on the 1st of January, which I always told myself I would never do, like I've never set a New Year's resolution. I just think they're a waste of time. I didn't set this one. It just happened that we started on the 1st of January, but we just started with eating better, because that's always the number one thing. You know, I've hardly ever lost weight running. It's always eating is my problem, because I eat
everything.
Yeah, I ran whatever, that many miles, so now I can eat the whole
bag of Sour Patch Kids.
Yeah, so I'd lost like 75 pounds before I ever exercised at all.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I met David Emerson at the Pulse Run in May, and I asked him if I could come and be like a crew chief for him at Bear. And he's like, well, why don't you pace me? And I was like, well, I don't run. I'm trying to get in shape, but right now I
just not there.
I don't know if I could run to pace you, but you know, I'm trying. I'm trying to get there. So then later in the summer we got together for a couple of runs, and I said, you know, maybe I could jump in like from Franklin. For those who don't know, that's like mile 62, and run to like the ski resort at mile 75. So like 13 miles. And then maybe I could jump in again, you know, because I've had foot problems. I've just been kicking my butt for a bunch of years. That's the other problem. So I told him I'd do that little stretch, get off my feet, ice my foot down. Maybe I'll join you from Ranger Dip, which is like mile 93 or something, down to the finish. So the last 7 miles. And believe it or not, I trained harder to be a pacer for David than most 100-milers I've ever.
Really?
Is
it because of the commitment to somebody else, supporting somebody else?
Yeah, I think so. I think it was just different to feel like I'm not doing this for myself. I'm doing it for someone else. And so I want to live up to this commitment, even though I told him I was just going to be a crew guy.
But it's a responsibility.
Yeah. And so I was running a lot to be a maybe pacer. And then by the end of the summer, I was like, dude, I'm all in now. I'm going to run.
Feeling good.
I'm going to run from 62 to the end. So whatever that is, 38 miles. And I joined him for it, and I felt really good, and he had a great time, and
nice.
We had a good time together through the night. It was fun.
That's awesome.
And then I signed up for my first 100-miler in 6 years. the next spring to run the Buffalo Run.
Oh, wow. Got to go back to that one.
And I hired a coach for the first time in my life.
Is it helping? I've never done that, but I've been interested.
So this was 21. So I hired the coach in the summer or fall, I guess, for the spring and then into the summer of 22. And I was like, I know how to do this. I've ran I don't know, at this point, 1,400 milers.
Yeah. You've ran the distance. You know that it's a roller coaster.
I just need someone to be accountable to, kind of like how I was more accountable to being a pacer than I was to myself. Because if it's just me, I just kind of like, oh, what sounds fun today?
Yeah.
And that worked for a long time. Well, now that I'm not a spring chicken anymore, I need to
mix it up,
be a little more focused. And I think it helped me to have somebody to be accountable to and to mix it up in a way that maybe I wouldn't have mixed it up. And, when I went to the Buffalo Run in 23, anyway, when I went to that 100-miler, I was feeling really good and I ended up third place.
Oh, wow. That's a hell of a bounce back.
Yeah. It's one of those races too, though. It's like, it just depends on who shows up.
Yeah.
Because it's
But you have to run that race smart.
Yeah, it's an early season race.
Mm-hmm.
And that year it started on Thursday, which is ridiculous. But, so that kept the numbers down, which was good. But
it worked out.
I came in right behind the lady who won the Cocodona 250 this year.
Oh, my goodness.
So I felt pretty solid about that.
Yeah, I would too. So with all these races, all these adventures and stuff you've been on, do you have any bucket list adventures or races that you still want to accomplish? What's at the top of it right now?
I still want to do Hard Rock one of these years, but I'm number 7 on the wait list right now, but it's probably not going to happen. The race is this Friday, and I don't have a ticket to Colorado because I don't think it's moving that fast.
Yeah.
There's one guy ahead of me that I know is going to drop. One of the pro guys had an appendix out yesterday. So he's like,
probably not going to show
I'm going to wait and see how it goes. See if I'm going to drop out or not. Like, he's out. So that means I'm number 6. But
so Hard Rock, that's the bucket list one then.
Yeah. I've heard people say, hey, the trail's open every day of the year. You can go do it for free. But
I know haven't you been out there and kind of explored some of the course?
That's what I was doing the weekend beforehand. I went to the hospital.
Oh, jeez.
And her condition was active when we were in Colorado. And what would have happened if that had happened when we were in Colorado? Would our kids, like my older daughter, would she have taken her to the hospital? That's a lot of responsibility for a 18-year-old to say, I'm taking someone to the ER. And the other thing that was just serendipitous, honestly, was that she was at a friend's house. Mm-hmm. Had she been at home, she might have just gone upstairs and taken a nap because I'm not feeling well.
It could have been drastically different.
Yeah, you might just fall asleep and that would have been that. Yeah. The fact that she was somewhere and needed to be picked up is probably what saved her life. Anyway, yeah, I was there that year. I ran from Telluride to Silverton, essentially. And, it was rough, but I think I could do it given the chance.
Well, fingers crossed, even if it doesn't work out this year, that you can mark that off your bucket list.
Yeah, I'm at the point too where, when I first started, I was doing everything that I could drive to, right? So everything local, Bear, Wasatch,
Scout, Beaverhead.
Yeah.
Beaverhead's a beautiful course too. I'm Tough. How do we not mention I'm Tough? How many memories do we have there?
Yeah, my problem is I've never finished it. So,
oh man, that's got to be on the bucket list. And then too, you're gonna have to finish that up.
I've done everything there but finish. Paced, crewed, been an aid station captain.
It's an ass kicker. It is an absolute ass kicker. Well, Ryan, I appreciate you taking the time to sit here and chat. We've got so many memories. We could, go on for hours, but I want to ask you a couple of questions to kind of tie a bow on this thing here. One of them revolves around the shirt that you're wearing.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me what it says on your shirt?
My shirt says, "Don't mess with the fat kid."
What's underneath it there?
Oh, I made this once upon a time when I have a blog that I used to write on. I haven't written on it forever, but has the address to my blog on it.
And what's the significance of that blog?
It was basically kind of like race reports and memories of being out on the trail more than anything. And I don't know, it's just kind of a journals more than anything. And I think about writing in it a lot to fill in the gaps maybe a little bit, or
let the gaps fill in themselves as you start just to write whatever it is that happens to be top of mind at that moment.
Yeah, I think the one that I want to write that I haven't written most is Wasatch 2016. So when Hannah was in the hospital, I was signed up for Wasatch. So she went into the hospital on July 30th, and Wasatch is always the weekend after Labor Day. So it's like September 8th, 9th, 10th, something usually every year. And I told Michelle, I said, this is going to sound really terrible and horrible of me, but I really want to go. I know that I could just not go and lose my money and be here, but I need to not be here, clear my head, get in a better mental space. And then when I return, I can be more present and be, a better husband, a better father, all of those things. Anyway, one of the pictures that I gave you for, to put on the episode is a picture of me and Christine Birch. And that was me and her coming into Lamb's Canyon together, the big old smile on her face.
Okay, I was wondering where that was at.
And when that picture was taken, Hannah was sitting in the ICU in a coma. And her husband, Tim, was there, and I think he's the one that took the picture. And Derek Call was there. So she paced me down from Big Mountain down to Lambs, and then Derek paced me, I think, from there to the end. And I told Derek when we got down there, he obviously knew what was going on and everything. And I said, if I even think about quitting, I want you to punch me right in the face because I cannot come down here and not be successful, because being here is meant to lift me up. And if I come home anything less than finishing, it's going to have the exact opposite effect on me. And for those who know me, when I go to a 100-miler, I typically have this whiteboard. And before I leave, I always ask my family to write down a mile that I'll think about them during the race. And it's just kind of for fun. And I do my best to remember the numbers. And if I can, take a picture of what's going on at that point of the day. And, on that one, it was like everybody had their mile. And then on Hannah's, I wrote the hardest one, because this was my third time doing Wasatch. For me, my personal hardest mile is one that is called the Grunt. It's after Ant Knolls, which is like mile 82 or something. And it has some ridiculous, like 1,200 feet of gain at mile 82.
Oh, jeez.
But when you get to it, you're right on the ridge to where you can see Salt Lake, but you can also see the backside to where you can see Heber Valley.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is Hannah's mile. And when we got to the top of the ridge was right when the sun peaked over the horizon. And that year was like a fire year. I think every year is practically a fire year by the time you get to September. But we were standing on the ridge just as the sun came up, and it was that like blood red fire sunrise.
Just intense.
Yeah, it was just one of these like perfect moments, perfect timing. And
it was what it was supposed to be.
Yeah, it was just a great moment. So anyway, when I resurrect the blog, that'll probably be the first one that I put in there. And that would be my first to get back in the
get your writing back again.
Writing.
Yeah. Well, I'll look forward to reading that. All right. Well, I've got one more question to wrap this thing up, and it can go whichever way you want to take it. But the question is, What does legacy mean to you? And what is the legacy that you hope to be remembered for?
I think it's kind of like we were talking earlier about how when I tell my kids, I don't care if they ever run, I just hope that through my example, as a father and as a runner and, somebody who works hard, that, they can see that you can do hard things and you can set difficult goals and you can achieve things if you just put the work in.
And try.
Yep.
I love that. That's beautiful.
And consistency, that's really, with, running for sure, but, with everything in life, consistency is the thing that gets you there. It's just,
you got to put in the reps.
Yeah. A little bit of positive movement in the right direction. Every little bit helps every day. And that's what I hope they remember me for. I know because we had these conversations with them, when times were really difficult, that I was calm under pressure. I think that was a positive thing for them as well, which is really, really hard.
Hard to do. I can only imagine. Well, Ryan, thank you so much for taking this time. Not just from a casual relationship of running. You've become a very good friend of mine over the years. We've shared some amazing adventures. And I just want to end this by saying thank you very much for the inspiration you've been to me, because where I really came into this ultra running scene and was introduced to anybody really was that Celebration Park run. And one of my favorite pictures of the entirety of my running career is the picture of you and I running next to each other. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I had, my Camelback hiking water vest, whatever it was on. But that time that you spent running with me and chatting with me when I went out there and didn't know a single person, I don't know if you know how much it meant to me. You brought me in and I felt welcome, even though I was just this random person that showed up. You made me feel welcome, and we built this friendship and had all these amazing memories and adventures over the years. And I want to say thank you so much for everything that we've shared and for your friendship.
Thank you.
With that, I'm going to say thanks again for taking the time to sit down and chat with me. And hopefully we're going to be on the trails again here together soon.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks. And that wraps up another episode of the Run from the Norm podcast. Thank you very much to my longtime adventure partner, Ryan Anderson, and I hope you found some inspiration in his incredible journey both on and off the trails. As always, I want to say a sincere thank you to you for sharing your time with us. And if you're enjoying what we're doing, please follow the Run from the Norm Facebook page and check out runfromthenorm.com for updates on new podcast releases. Stay passionate, embrace authenticity, be inspired, and just keep moving forward. Most importantly, get outside and run from the norm.
Check that mic, make sure it sound right, boy.